Hello and welcome to Lunch and Learn, presented by Codabears. My name is Bill Golis. I'll be the presenter today. Today's topic is Progress Database Maintenance. The first thing to be cognitive of with database maintenance is you want to stay current on software updates, patches, and hotfixes for both your database and your database server operating system as well. This will assist in addressing security issues, along with compatibility issues and other bugs that may exist and that are resolved as these updates come out. So stay current. Next, we're going to talk about the tools that we use to do database management within Progress. The primary tool is the Progress Explorer tool. The Progress Explorer tool is used for management and control of the databases and the application servers, the app servers within the Progress database. The PET runs only in a 32-bit environment unless you have performed a registry hack on a 64-bit environment to allow it to run within that environment. Typically, you'll have to have a 32-bit workstation if you run, for administration purposes, if you run your database and your application in a 64-bit environment. Unless you use the alternate tool, besides the PET, which is the Open Edge Explorer, also known as the Fathom tool. The Open Edge Explorer is a browser-based tool, the same functionality, basically, as the Progress Explorer tool, and it runs in a 32 or 64-bit operating system environment. But the browser-based tool I've found to be clunky and challenging to use. You need to click around to different screens to refresh information or to accomplish the task that you want to accomplish. It's much more productive to use the Progress Explorer tool, in my opinion, and that is what we're going to work with today. So, onto the Progress Explorer tool, located in your Open Edge folder, whatever version you happen to be running. And it's a little gear or sprocket icon, Progress Explorer tool. When you open the Explorer tool, you will see that you have two panels. The left panel shows what servers you're connected to, or actually what servers you have configured. And you'll see here we have the local host, and we have another server called V400PTT. If you want to add an additional server, you right-click on the Progress Explorer tool in the left panel, choose Add Progress Server. That'll bring up a server properties window. From here you put in your server name, no need for the backslashes, just the name of the server, and then your user and name and password for an account that has administrative privileges on that server, such that you can connect to the database. We won't be doing that today because we actually have our instance on the same machine, so this is going to be a local host connection. The next thing to do is to connect to the database. There are two ways to accomplish this. You can right-click on the server name and choose Connect, or you can just select whichever server that you want and choose the Connect icon in the toolbar. If you're already logged on to the local host with an account that has sufficient credentials, you won't need a password. You just click OK, and then it will connect to the database, and you'll see in your right panel it has the folders that you can manage. In the left, there's now a plus sign for a tree view. Bring that tree up, and you'll see the same things on both sides. You can expand that tree on the left to see all your databases or all of your app servers, which are the two things we're going to discuss today. And notice if you select databases in the left panel, it populates your databases and then your status of the databases and whether they're running or not. From this tool here, you can also right-click on any database and choose Properties to see its location, and that's where the database MFGCS is located. From here, you can also start and stop your databases. Two ways to do that. One is with a right-click and a start or a stop. The other is with the icon window up here. We're going to start up our Epicor Identify database, and notice that it went from not running to initializing to running, and now we're up and going. The next thing I'll show you within the PET is the app servers. If you select the app server top level here, it populates your right panel. Notice you have a status column here, but there's no information in there right now. You need to poll your app servers to populate the status. So it will go to the main, go with status, and we'll see what happens here. It comes up as not running. So let's go ahead and start that one. Two ways: you can right click on it and choose start, or you can use, again, up here in your toolbar. Now we see that it shows that it's starting. We'll jump down to the next the process server, and we can't because it won't come up until that one has started. And we'll check our status here. Notice that it's not running. Same thing if we go here and check our status, not running. Now that they're populated, they ask you to check the status here. And when you check the status, you will see a window with information on that particular app server and showing that it's active. From within those settings on the app server, or I'm sorry, if you go to properties here, you can view your various properties on the app server. A lot of information here, and more than you see on the database properties. And from within the broker settings, there is a logging setting. This is what you use when you want to troubleshoot problems with your application. Let's say that you've got your application is slowing down precipitously at some time during the day and you can't figure out why, or it's crashing. Generally, these logs and log files that you can view will give you indications of what's going on. The thing is, when these are out of the box, by default, they're set to error only. So the first log entry you would see in a log is an error. You don't see what is preceding that error, which is what you want to find out to be able to determine what caused the error. That's why the selection to do troubleshooting is verbose, where it gives you the most information and it tracks those app servers and their activity in real time. Be advised that you need to set this up on each of the app servers for each database that you want to monitor for problems, because the logging is specific to each app server, so verbose. And then the broker log file threshold size. Typically we set this to 5 megabytes, so it's going to be 5 a million. And the number of logs to retain, typically between 5 and 10. We'll make this one 7. And that way you have a decent history of what's happened within your app servers, but you don't have a huge amount of disk space being consumed over time. That is your PET, and a few things about starting and stopping your database and setting your logging within the app servers. I want to real quick talk about the other primary tool to be used in managing your Progress database, and that is the Proenv tool, which you'll again find in the OpenEdge folder. And here we go, Proenv. That brings up your command line interface for the Proenv tool. This is used to do to back up and restore databases, to run the Pro utilities that I will show you some of here in just a few minutes. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the most important a maintenance aspect of a database, and that is backups. Backups and restoring. More to the point, creating backups and verifying that they're able to be restored to a live database in the event of a disaster, a disk crash, a server destruction, etc. When setting up your backup plan, the first thing you need to ask yourself is what's going to be the frequency of your backups? How often will you be creating a backup of your live database? Typically, daily is a minimum, but again, that's going to be dependent on your risk tolerance for you losing data. And more than once a day is common within high transaction industries. Some organizations even choose to back up every hour. The trade-off here is your risk of data loss versus your system slowdown during those backups that you run online, as they say, while the system's up. And you might ask, how significant is the potential performance hit and how long the backups take to run? And as usual in variable environments, it does vary. From a small database, 2 or 3 gigs, might back up in 30 seconds or a minute on strong hardware. Larger databases, they get into the 10 and 20 gigs. If the hardware isn't that robust, or if it's being used a lot, so there's not a lot of resources available, it can be 30 minutes to run a backup, or even an hour. The slowdown during that period can be from negligible to significant. Depends on your environment. So you want to test that and work with your users to make sure that you're not causing them pain. And you may want to set up backups if you're doing them more than once a day during break times or lunch times, such that the transactional load in the system is 0 or very low. All right, now to talk a bit about where to write your backups to. Initial backups are generally written right to a disk, either on the same server or a network attached storage device attached to that same server for your on-site backups. Then for off-site backups, where you retain information outside or away from the server that's running your live environment, such that if there was a physical destruction, like a fire or a tornado was to destroy your data center or your server room, having these tapes stored elsewhere allows you to retain your information even in the event of a catastrophic physical destruction. There's 3 typical mediums to store your offsites. One is tape, which is traditional, but the capacity is not that robust these days, and tape is slow to read and write from. In addition, tape drives can be a pain to maintain. The other option is removable disks, which have become much more popular in recent years due to cost has fallen quite a bit. Plus, with a USB 3 interface or a Ethernet interface on the removable disk, they're quite fast to write from, to write to and to write from. And the third option is your cloud setups. Clouds being services like Carbonite and such, where they back up to the internet, to their data centers, and they manage all your backup sets. Downside to the cloud is you have to have plenty of bandwidth to be able to write your backups back and forth. In addition, you are at the mercy of the provider as to the true security of the solution. But they have typically been rated pretty good. And once you have your backup plan in place and you're off and running, the first thing you want to do is test the restore to see if you're capturing a viable backup that can be restored effectively to your live environment. And then this should also be tested again periodically. How often? Well, that's entirely up to you based on your risk tolerance. Quarterly, monthly, annually. We'd recommend at least once a year that you do that test to make sure that your backups are in fact restorable. All right, so How do we use the Proenv tool to do your backups? This is just for manual that we're going to show you here. When you do your automatic backups, you typically write a small script and you use a Windows scheduler to execute that script on a regular basis to capture your online backups. The two kinds of backups that you can do are online and offline. As you would imagine, the online is when the database is running, and the offline is when it's not. The first thing that you do with the Proenv is you type in prompt, prompt. That will set it up and direct it to sit on the directory that your OpenEdge install is located. But to actually do backups, you want to be sitting on the directory that your database is residing. So for us, in this case, let's verify where it's at. If we go right here on our PET and we choose our database and check properties, we see that it's residing at Epicor 905 DB on the C drive. So we're going to change directories to that here, and it is Epicor 905 DB. Once we're here, I run a quick directory to see that we're in the right spot, and sure enough, you see here is here's our database data file, the D1. Here's our B1, which is our before image file. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So we are going to run a backup here, and to run the backup, the command is pro backup, or a pro bkup. Online, because we're doing this online while the database is running, and then your database name, and then your database backup name, which here it's going to be backup .1, and then we're going to run that. You can see it shows us what we're running here and about how much 6.5 gigs of media it's going to need, which is right around the size of the actual database here at 6.8990. So that took 5 minutes and 2 seconds of real time to write the backup. As you can see now, it shows the size, how many blocks you used, the size of the backup, and the time that it took. Now, let's say that we wanted to restore that database back to our live. We would need to stop our database prior to restoring. So we will do so here. If we choose our database here and we say stop, it will shut down. Now we, of course, we would have shut down our app servers first had they been running, or if this was a real test. We will do a restore here. Now we're currently sitting in the directory that has our database and it has our backup. It's generally safest and easiest to do from the same directory. Just if you're bringing it back up to your live system, drop it into the same directory as your database, and then from there, the command is ProRes database name, right? MFGsys. And then the location of the backup file. which in this case is the same as where we're at. C:\\epicor 905 db, and the name of our backup, and we can see, is backup.1. I'm going to enter, and it's going to say that it already exists. Want to overwrite? The answer is yes. And we're going to see the restore now. And we're done now. The restore was faster. Only took 2 minutes and 18 seconds. And that's a restore done offline, of course. Everything has to be done offline except for the Pro Backup online. And once you do a restore, if you're restoring your live to something other than the live slot, like you're restoring to the test, train, or pilot slots, you're going to want to edit your system agent from within the Epicor software. You need to change the ports because the ports come across with your database, and if you're not running live, which ports are typically a 9001 and 9003, those ports will be entered, so you won't be able to print your reports and such. So you need to change the one. If you're, let's say you're restoring it to test, you want to change them to 9021 and 9023. Train is 9011 and 13, and pilot is 31 and 33. All right, that's a little bit about backups and restores. We're going to cover a couple more things here. The one other thing that you need to keep an eye on with your database is the size of the before image file, what's called the BI file. You can see that within the database structure here, there is a file that's called the .b1. This one's only 2 megs for a 6.9 gigabyte database. The rule of thumb is that the B1 file should be 10% or less in that vicinity of the full D1 file size. The before image file is basically used to capture a record prior to it being, the transaction being committed to the database. So if something goes wrong, the database can just flip that record back to what it was until it commits the write, and then it's too late to do so. If you find your BI is getting to be larger than 10% of the database size, typically you want to truncate that, and that's done from within the Proenv Tool. Here is get back to our prompt here. We will run this because the database has already been stopped, and it needs to be so to truncate your BI. And the syntax is pro-util, U-T-I-L, and that's pro-utility. You're going to see that most of the or all of the utilities that you run against progress from the Proenv start with pro-util. Typically, then you get your database name, which is mfgsys, and then what are you running? A hyphen capital C is here, and then truncate BI. BI. This usually runs rather quickly, which it just did. If we run a directory now, we'll see that our BI file is down to 8 kilobytes. That's the default size of an empty BI file, 8192 bytes. So that's your truncate BI. The next thing we're going to talk about to be run here is the database repair utility. Again, your DB needs to be stopped. So this is typically run when there's some corruption is found or suspected in a database. You need to truncate the BI first before you run the repair tool, which we just did. So now we're going to run the repair tool. It's Proenv, P-R-O-U-T-I-L, like all the utilities. And then your database name, MFG and then hyphen capital C, and then we're going to go with database DB RPR. That's the repair tool. When you run that by clicking enter, it will bring up the database repair manual. From here, you typically choose one to scan the database. And then the typical settings are remove a record fragment, load block, load the RM dump file, and reformat to a free block, which are up here at the top. We're not going to go through the database repair. I just wanted to go over how to run it here. And typically, after you run a repair, you need to rebuild the index, which in fact is called Proenv. Of course, your DB name, MFG and then your capital C, hyphen capital C, and then IDX, index build, which is how to rebuild your index. If we run that, it runs real quickly because we didn't need to do it here. And typically, after you do a repair and an index rebuild, you're ready to put this database back into production. Then there's one more database, a maintenance item that we're going to talk about here. This is called the dump and load. The dump and load is akin to a defragmentation of your database, but it also will economize on disk space, and you'll be able to identify any corruption if it exists. Depending on your transaction volume, you want to run a dump and load at least a minimum of every couple of years. It will increase your performance typically, so your users like to see it. And but it is it's a significant undertaking. You know, it might take you half a day or a day, and it has to be done while the database is offline. So typically at night or on the weekend. And the steps that you use to do a dump and load are: first, you create an empty database that you're going to be putting all your information into, and then you dump your schema and sequence definitions from your live database. Then you load the schema and sequence defs into your empty database so that you can dump your data, which is your next move. And once you've done that, you verify your database size, and if it's past 2 gigabytes per extent, you're going to need to extend the empty database to accept large files, because by default a Progress database only accepts 2 gig extents. Once you've done that, then you are going to load the data and re-index it into your empty database. Then you need to manually verify the data. Basically, you're going to use a tool that's within the Epicor dump and load kit to show you how many records from each table you have had prior to running the dump and load and afterwards. It's a little tedious, but you need to manually compare each of those numbers to make sure that you dumped and loaded the same amount, so that your data is all been captured. The last thing that you do, and once you determine that, is correct is you reset your sequence controls with a database conversion tool that is within Epicor, and then you're complete. You can put your database back into production. So that's database management, the short version. I hope you enjoyed the lunch and learn. Thank you very much for attending.